Good morning.
How are you? It's afternoon for you guys.
Almost.
It's
Just
just
about.
8:30 my time.
Oh, well, good morning. So, Julie tells me that you have a little situation on your hands.
A shark.
Yeah. She didn't give me much detail other than the dog's age. Is it 18 weeks?
Right about there, when they originally contacted me, they told me he was about 10 weeks. And then I went over a couple days, just did some one-on-one with like kennel and potty training and stuff. And I found out he was 8 weeks. But they had him for several weeks. And I'm
Ooh.
like, okay.
Well, that already explains
Yeah.
things.
So it turns out when they got the supposed certificate from the breeder, they found him on Craigslist. They gave him till at 5 weeks old.
What's the
Yeah.
breed?
He's a husky.
This is perfect. Yeah, no, I know exactly the situation. And so basically, before we get any further, I will ask you more questions about him. But right there, the fact that he left the pack early, and that now he's biting around food, there's a large chance that he would have, if he stayed with the pack, would have been corrected for that behavior.
Right.
Now this is where it gets sticky. I'm not even I'll tell you what to do afterwards, so we don't have to get into anything complicated. But if that was my dog, the way I would want to do it would be as organic as possible. I would put food down. I would have the dog come up to touch the food. This is not what I'm going to be having you do, by the way. You can write it down if you want. I would literally take food of high value with a slip lid on the dog for safety in case things got out of hand, although it's a 12-week-old dog.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's not going to kill you.
So
So,
now he is probably closer to 18 or 19 weeks.
still, I mean, that's...
Yeah, to me, he's shown no other issues with hand feeding, taking resources away from him, nothing other than that one time. That was just the other day.
See?
And
So explain to me in a second. I'll have you go back to and explain that situation so that we can connect the dots. But right now, this guy hasn't been corrected for this behavior appropriately. It's either that or he is really the alpha of the pack and how they got it. So,
yeah.
I mean, every now and then they come through these dogs that actually would end up being taking care of business in the pack, but more than likely this isn't the dog. So what I would do is I would take food of high value. I would let the dog know that it's in the environment. I would set it down on the floor. The dog would come over to investigate it. I would make my sound of disapproval, which is shh, and then I'd correct him with my hands. Cesar Millan, shush, shh.
Okay.
And you can do any sound you want. You can say no, anything you want.
Just your disapproval.
Yes. And so then I correct the dog physically with my hand. And this is where it gets tricky because most of the time they snap back the first time. That's why I don't have people do this. I mean, obviously, I don't have owners do. I don't just describe this ritual or process of claiming food from the dog. But at this young of age, I use my hand. If the dog's going to snap at me, it's going to snap at me, and then I'm going to follow through and probably pin it to the side. And then what happens after that is they don't do it anymore. And then, like you said, after that one experience, but I go all the way. I put them on their side because you try to put your teeth on an elder, on a human. We're going to go all the way to see what's inside you, see how bad you actually are. Some dogs submit immediately, some dogs fight and then submit. Either way, they stop. After that, they don't touch that food. You can call them, you can leave the room, you can call them past the food, they'll give it a wide berth, they won't touch it because you claimed it. And then from there, I'll walk up to the food and grab a piece and feed the dog. And this is then the beginning of our relationship. And that's pretty much most of the time, unless you have a very serious case that's deep rooted, with a young dog like this, it's over between me and that dog. It is done. It is not going to come up again. We had the conversation. At home, he missed that with his pack. Whether he was going to do this to humans or not, it's hard to tell. But the humans who he first did it to didn't respond in a way to shut it down. They obviously unintentionally reinforced it by either ignoring it or allowing him to get the food, continue to eat the food.
Right.
So he believes that he can do this to humans. Now you have an experience with him already. He already tried this to you. So then he gets to a new human, which is you. He tries this with you, and then what'd you do? What happened?
So actually, I've done everything you just said except for petting him.
That's okay,
So
as long as the
I
conversation.
caress him with my hand. I give him a nope. Actually, I go nope. I put like a little P on it. Nope.
That's fine.
And then I jabbed him in the side or bonked him on the head with my hand. I have used a bonker, but not really from a distance with him. It's more like just in the kennel.
Yes.
But when he like puts his hand like towards me or his head towards me,
Yeah.
or he bites the leash, that's how I give him like a correction.
Oh, good. That's
No,
nice.
I don't like that, and then bonk, like a little tap or a jab.
Yeah, that's
And
good.
I'm super gentle with him. I'm not afraid of that. But
Well, yeah, because they're
he does
tough.
respond well. He doesn't react back.
Good. These are what we're getting into. We want to see the next thing to document is how the dog responds to the correction. Because some dogs are literally just going to take it and accept it, and other dogs are going to get nippy. And the dogs that get nippy are the ones that are going to get the pin from me. So basically, if he didn't nip back at me, if I touched him and he just kind of took it and did not think about being assertive with me, then I don't bring it to the next step. So he didn't do that to you, so that's great. If he were to come back with a little nip, it's all over for him. He gets a big boy correction, it's done. It's done.
Yeah, I
And then
feel
it's
like
over.
because he's been here a couple weeks now, I feel like he's starting to push that a little bit more. Not as often, and I'm doing more drills with him, like I have the food on the floor and walk around and stuff, but I think he's starting to push it a little bit, so I'm not gonna accept that that's still okay. I think maybe I'll
Yeah, do that for yourself. This is not something that goes home with him, but this is why if you can. The reason why it's so important to do it the first time is because it's hard to get an organic experience again after a correction. So if you correct the dog enough to keep him hesitant, but you didn't bring it all the way, it's going to be hard to set up that organic situation again where he actually isn't even paying attention. You go straight for the food and then gets the correction. We would like to capitalize on this ritual. That's why I call it a ritual, because it's set up. I go and get the food. I know what's going to happen, and I know where I want to lead the conversation, what conversation I want to have. It's all planned. It's all planned by me. And not the dog. The dog thinks it's an organic situation. It's all 100% set up. So that happens for me. This is not something I have the owners do unless it was a super, like, specific. I am doing it for my own. Yes, I need to be the first human that you decide to not do this to, so you can have a relationship for the first time with a human where you accept that you cannot assert yourself, and whatever that human says, you just do. This is the goal between the relationship between you and him at that young age. Now, I'm imagining you're going to train him up on the e-collar by the time this is all said and done.
Yep, I just conditioned him last night. Really receptive.
Very good.
And,
So basically,
different sizes of muzzles too, but I'm gonna. I have a really big one. So, but I did like a basic little exercise with him, and he's very eager with the food.
good. So you got a good setup. I'm thinking.
Get a muzzle condition too.
Get a muzzle condition, because that's just going to be a really responsible thing for you to do. You have time with him. So you got time. Take as much time as you need. I won't even put a time limit on yourself. Of course, you probably gave them one, but just for yourself, just take what you need. This is the approach I would take with this dog. I would focus on training the commands on the e-collar very, to a polished and finished quality, because you can do that without having any of these fights with him, because he's, like you said, when you're working for food, he's motivated, he's learning, he's got his learning cap on, he can learn place, he can learn down, he can learn recall, he can learn all these things on the e-collar without tackling the food aggression. He can learn out, which means, you know what I mean? He can learn these things without setting him into this space. He just learns these skills that are reinforced by the e-collar, so he understands. By the time we go and tackle that problem, he already understands the correction on the e-collar, he already understands the commands, he understands what out means. So you take your time with this, you don't even have to really worry too much about the food aggression. Continue training with him earning food, and that's the only way he earns it for now. I wouldn't put it in a bowl yet until we're ready to start working on, because the bowl is going to produce more likely the situation, especially in the kennel.
Yeah, and
so we'll get there.
I had already done exercises where I take the bull back many times.
Good.
He's been here on and off for 2 weeks, and it was just that one time. And I think he just perceived me all of a sudden now, and I've even taken it after he started eating.
And he sees that You're not dangerous. He knows you're not dangerous. He knows you're not out to hurt him. He just knows, don't do that to me. And he doesn't do it to you now. So that right there tells me, if I'm reading the situation, that it's not going to be a serious case. Doesn't mean it can't turn into one, though. Doesn't mean that he couldn't get home. If biting works ever again, it's going to be a problem. It should never work ever again. Which means so we got to set them up for success. So first of all, we limit the interactions they have in that situation right off the bat. Like by the time he goes home, he should be eating in the kennels. And there's a way that I do this that's really easy, where you literally put the dog in the kennel, and the dog knows the rules in the kennel, you know? Then you go get the food, you tell the dog to sit, you teach them to wait for the food, which is usually pretty easy. You let them eat, you shut the kennel, you come back 10 minutes later, you open up the kennel, you don't reach in for the bowl, folks. This is what people do, right? You then recall the dog out, put him on place across the room, you go in, you grab the bowl, and that's feeding. And then you call him back in and put him back in the kennel. That's it. Hey, that's the safest way. They'll never have a moment.
Right, and that's what you're saying, limit the interactions.
Around that particular.
And I told her I was really glad that he did this to me so I could see, because he has been nipping at them, he growls at them, he gets really a lot more aggressive with them, and he has bitten a little boy on the fingers a little bit, not nipping, but bite.
It's totally normal, though. You know, it's totally normal for certain temperaments to be doing this.
We'll figure out where this is, not necessarily where this is coming from. It is what it is, but how do we deal with it?
It's pretty much. You need to let them know this.
Feeding is feeding, though, you said.
You need to let them know this, first of all, where they went wrong, what could have stopped it, and all this stuff, and how dogs work. And even though they're never going to do this now, they're on an e-collar program, they're not going to go home and do this, but you can bring them back to that moment where they remember he's getting carried away, he's starting to nip at the kids, or he's doing this or that. You bring them back there, and you say, well, what'd you do? And then they'll tell you pretty much it will equal to nothing. And you'll say, you don't have to say this, but I say, if you smacked him in the face, under the chin right there, knock it off, it would have been over. You wouldn't even have to call me. But for some reason, this is where I don't put it on them anymore. I take it off. I said, for some reason, nobody's doing that anymore. And that's why I'm sitting here in this beautiful fucking house, because I'm correcting everybody's dogs for them. That's it. So then they know that's where you went wrong. Where you went wrong is you didn't physically punish them. That's where you went wrong. Somewhere in your head, you knew you should have. One of you, and I'll look at them, the wife and the husband or whoever, one of you knew it. You knew it, but you didn't fucking do it. And there you go. And that's how that happens. Because in a pack, he would have got corrected physically and put in his place. And in homes with soft humans, or humans that are uninformed, or humans that are busy, they don't get that stuff. They form beliefs that they can push humans around, and it gets bad. You caught it early. It's beautiful. So this is how I think you got to do with this guy. Train him up fully. Train him out so that he's going home where he believes in your system to the point where he'll listen to anybody who's giving the commands, because he's not doing it because animal to animal that person has earned the respect or is more dominant or believable. He's doing it because if he doesn't, he gets an e-collar correction. And that is enough. That is enough, and that is all you're selling. You understand that? Unless you rehab this dog, that is all you're selling. So here comes the question. That's right. Well, as long as they have that e-collar on, they're fine. As long as your training's good enough where if they're having a problem, they click it and he shuts up and lays down or listens. Right? Your e-collar training's got to be on point. But they're always going to have the collar on whenever he's out of the kennel. So as long as he is okay with putting the collars on, they're not going to have a problem, because now they got recall, down, out, all this stuff backed up by corrections that you did the job so that he just believed it. He's so young. If you do this so consistently the way you are, he's just going to believe this is how life works. This is how I get out of the door. This is how I go eat. This is how I listen to my humans when they say these 5 commands. You're really going to be able to affect this guy because he's so young. You've got a unique opportunity. If he lived till 4 or 5 doing this nonsense and then finally bit somebody really bad and then went to you, we have a huge problem. He's going to be very difficult and very more assertive. You caught him you have a couple good signs. You did a correction with your hand. He respected that, and he hasn't tried to bite you since. That is huge. That right there, that's a conversation for the owners. He's trying to bite you. He's trying to bite you consistently. He tries to bite me. I physically correct him. He never did it again. They need to know that. Even though they're not going to do that, people need to know that. So next dog they get, they know. they need to understand so they can tell their friends, this is where everybody's going wrong. Somebody knew that when he was biting their little boy's hands that they needed to do something about that.
Yeah.
And nobody did it. So that's
Yeah,
a
and
good choice.
I think my big issue is I'm not I'm comfortable on the e-collar. Last weekend, and this is after 2 years, Josh. I mean, I see you. 2 years on and off training with my two huskies. I had them off leash camping.
Nice.
That's how long it's taken me. But that's on me. I don't practice with them. I get frustrated because I don't get a great fit all the time. I fitted him last
Yeah,
night.
that can be a problem.
Super soft, but I've got the wing tips. So I'm just telling myself I don't have to do it right. I just need to not be frustrated and keep doing it.
Yes, don't worry too much. Yeah.
I'm just not super experienced and confident with, I really, and I'm a little inept also, with dialing up and stuff like that. I always have to stop and, look through my progressives.
Well, you know what? What I'm thinking is you've already got, the e-collar is not even the most, it is really important to help the owners through the transfer process. Don't get me wrong.
Yes.
It is super great. But the most important thing about the dog training is being able to have good judgment, know how to correct. It doesn't always have to be the e-collar. It can be a poke in the finger. You can get a lot done without the e-collar. But the reason why I like you to focus on the e-collar with this particular dog is so that the success going home, because he's going to base it off from relationships. But with the e-collar, they tend to let that go because they know that it's consistent. They know that the owners can do what you can do. Now, I want you to know that the e-collar, the way you look at it, the way you view it, as long as you see, and I know you have the physical getting used to it of turning the body, that takes time. It took me over a year, and I was using it a lot, and it took me over a year to start feeling comfortable, and I still drop the remote all the time and all that, and accidentally, mess up or something. But it's just...
I just got a carabiner and hooked it to my shirt when we were kayaking, luckily. Because I also got my dogs on the kayak. My husband didn't believe I could do it.
Nice.
I'm like, of course they're going to do it. And it was so awesome. And I had hooked them with a carabiner to my top, and I capsized.
Did
I
you?
lost both my car keys. I lost both my
Oh,
car
God,
keys,
Jesus.
but not my e-collar.
It literally... That's the worst thing that could happen. But you cut that e-collar, and it's waterproof.
I'm sitting in this lake for 7 hours. Oh darn! But I've got my e-collar, and my dogs got off leash, and my dogs got in the kayak, and they loved it.
You never found the keys, did
I
you?
know, I just gotta practice.
You do gotta practice, but I want you to think of it like it's almost like your way of touching a dog or correcting physically. So when you bend over and give a dog a correction or a bonk or something, it's on the neck, so it's kind of like right where they would probably get corrected by another dog. But you can think of the intensity of just like a poke. And the way I do it, if I'm very low numbers and it's just feeling like nothing, I want the dog to know that's just me trying to ask you to do something or mildly disagreeing with what you're doing or whatever, or reminding or whatever way I'm using it in the context. And to know that that's me giving them information. And then there's firmer ones, just like you would do a firmer touch or a firmer pop, firmer numbers. So it's not really all that complicated, but where it gets complicated, where it can look like it's a mess, and I think this is the most important part to be able to be good at doing, is getting the dog to understand that e-collar is you. And not some foreign thing that's happening randomly. So,
Yeah, that's what I was noticing last night too, I think. And again, I was...
because you'll see, they won't know where it's coming from.
I think he was just like, what the heck? There's a bug on me.
That is the thing. And I did that too. The first time I ever used an e-collar with my dog, it was a cheap e-collar. I didn't have any training. I was not a professional trainer. And he did the same thing. He ran around like a crazy guy. Of course, I didn't have a leash on. And he looked like he was biting at his neck, even though I only did it once and it wasn't even a high level. Or maybe it wasn't even stim. I don't know what it was. Vibration. I think it was vibration. He ran around biting around like he would if there was flies around his head. And then ran inside, was funky coming back outside like... It's amazing how if you get it wrong, it can really go wrong. So, but don't worry about it, because here's the thing is you can recover. Dogs are so adaptable. You can clean up any mistake you make for the most part. So the way that I do it to have the dog realize it's me is I tend to start with recall. You just see it's fun with the dog. It's not that difficult. And the way we've been doing it, we're using the tone, which is a pain in the ass for you because it adds another button. But the way that we do it with the
I
tone,
can't figure out how to change this from vibrate to tone.
oh, I can show you how to do
My
that.
original Einstein 300 paper trying to figure it out.
It's basically turning it to 0 and then going back and holding that L back there, that light button. See the L back there?
So turn it on.
You gotta turn it on first.
I've got it on momentary and continuous both.
You gotta turn it to
Okay,
0. And then and then it's gonna be holding the power button in while you click the T, and it'll beep. So you gotta,
The power button on
and then,
while I click the T.
yeah, you gotta do it quick though, because you don't wanna
Okay,
turn it
right
off.
now it's vibrate, okay. Power button.
And T.
Oh, then it just went beep.
And then beep. And then do the T again, it should do it. I know, but I had to look it up on,
It's on, right? It's been like 6 months since I got my hair done, but yeah, it's on.
I had to look it up on YouTube, so. I don't know, I don't read the manuals, I just look it up. And then, or have a Gabby show me or something. But basically, we've been using recall, and that they get the beep. They don't know what the beep means, and you see them hear the beep, and they're like, "What the heck is that?" And then we say "come," and they're like, even if they don't know what "come" means, at least they hear you interacting with them. And then I hit a little bit of stim low, something that they feel, and then I guide them towards me, and that's the pattern I use. So it's beep, come, stim, and then the leash.
You don't do a stem and then add the tone?
Well, from the beginning lately, I've been doing beep first, and then seeing that confusion of what the heck is that, and then I'll go into saying, I'll also say the word "come" because I noticed that by just talking or saying a name or anything, gets them to, think about coming towards you. So then by the time they start to turn around with a little bit of leash guidance, they start to look at you, then I'm squatting a little bit, not all the way to the ground, but kneeling, not even kneeling, just bending a little bit, and that, and like just praising them for even looking at me, usually gets them to come in my direction, and then they usually come in and get somewhere in front of me, and then I call that a recall, even though it was sloppy. They heard the beep and they ended up at my feet. So, and then I set it up again. But the way we're setting it up though is we're setting it up so that the dog is organically losing interest in us, walking away, and then beep, waiting a second, come, waiting a second, stim, waiting a second, leash, because the leash gives them the answer. And so what ends up happening is that beep, and they don't need the chain of information. It's just beep and they come to you. But at first, they have no idea what beep means. Now, if you do this right and with the right dog, like 10 reps later, they got that shit. I'm not promising that 10 rep thing, but you're going to notice, not that you don't have to go do more reps, but you're going to notice a large understanding. Cleaning up, yes. Position of the recall, yes, of course. But within the first session, you're going to hit that beep, and they're going to know that it means to come back to you somewhere. And that's huge.
And that's how you pair your e-collar.
Say that again.
Is that what you're saying?
You broke up a little bit.
So that's how you kind of make the connection to them that you're the e-collar.
Yes, that's one of the steps. And then that's the first step I take when they come in. And then the next step when they're done with that's session 1 really here. And then we go down to the kennel. Go ahead and take your time writing that down. I teach the recall with the beep until they're turning around without all the information
And
coming
I've
to
been
me.
doing that on the prong collar because I live on an acre and I have an internally fenced yard and coyotes, so I don't let him just free roam outside to go potty. I do all leash and everything, and so what I've been doing is with the prong is just letting him get to the end and
Right.
then going rocket here, and then I'll
Exactly.
give him a tug with the prong.
Exactly.
Okay, but now I need to deal with the
You're just
e-collar.
adding in one little thing before keep the same setup. It's perfect. You're doing it just right. Like to get to the end of the long line, it's all perfect. The only thing you might add in first, add the beep into what you're already doing because you're saving yourself time in the long run. Plus, you're capturing all those experiences with the memories of the e-collar stim. For like the rule that I have is if like one Mississippi goes by and he's not trying something, I'll just click some stim. I'm not doing it to punish. I'm not doing it for information necessarily. I just want it to be involved in it, in the process.
How much grace do you give because of age, though? I mean, he's sniffing outside.
Well,
I did the conditioning
Yes.
And so he's like going up and sniffing and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's.
And I'm like, okay, that's good. He's distracted.
Yes.
And I can get him off of that, but
Because
how much of that?
because it's a trick of finding that number that makes him want to drop what he's doing and figure out how to make that to go away, that correction go away. I sneak into that conversation when I'm doing the recall. So I will do a recall without anything that's kind of too heavy. They kind of just, like the first few maybe, they feel it. But you're going to notice there's going to be a point where they do a nice one. You're like, wow, they're doing good. And this might happen in the third or fourth rep. But then you're going to notice that they're not trying anymore.
No, they're
And
like,
then you see that with that nose going down to the ground or something. So then what I do, if they start coming towards you and they put their nose down or they go in another direction and or they just stop or whatever happens, they stop coming towards you, they stop moving towards you, then I continue to back up and I do another recall. Beep, come, or beep, stim, and then come for the answer. Because usually when you're using your voice, it's amazing how even if they don't know what you're saying, they can guess pretty good. So, and then I keep backing up. This is the hard part for all three of us to learn this technique. We back up slowly, and once the dog comes and touches our knees in front, we stop. And that produces them to stop and usually sit. And so at any point in the recall, if they make an error by going past us, we simply just turn around, back up, and do another recall with a stim behind it. And then the dog's really trying to figure out, how the hell do I stop this from happening? And then they get to the right position. They'll go back and forth, and you're trying to communicate with them to come to you. Eventually, they do come to you, and they come right in front of you. I'm not asking for a sit necessarily in the beginning, just in front of me. They get there, good, and depending on if it's appropriate or not, heavy praise. Not crazy praise, but heavy praise, like good job, soft, calm petting. Because now you want them to sit in that spot and feel how nice it is to not be asked to solve a problem. Because as soon as they hear that beep and then they feel the stim and they can't figure it out, it's becoming stressful. Coming to you, all that stress, it might have lasted a minute, but that feels like forever, right? Eventually they come to you and it all turns off. And you just say, good. You're not asking for something right away. You're not saying break and going right to another one. Don't shoot yourself in the foot and do that. You want them to feel the benefits of recalling to you. Let them sit there, let them de-stress, let them relax, and then you'll see that you'll feel them relax. You'll feel everything's good. Everything's calm, and then you're literally going to say break and walk away. I have a long line on, so I can walk away, so I can actually get my body away from them. And then usually they end up following you, but if they don't, and you get to the length of that long line and it's about to pick up, I let it pick up. I let the prong engage a little bit so that they feel it, and as soon as this is how they learn so fast, they feel that engage and then beep, almost like. That the prong collar and e-collar are the same tool. I almost imagine like to the dog, when this thing collapses, within a second, if I don't move towards it, it's gonna beep, and then if I don't move, it's gonna stim. So it's almost to the dog, it's like the same collar. It doesn't, and in my mind, it's the same collar, right? The beep's just saying, come on, and then they don't, and they stim, and then when you stim, they don't know what to do with it at first. Make sure you're popping them towards you. Then they start walking towards you a little bit. It's all graded. Good boy, good. Just praise it up. Just praise it up. If they stop,
It's gonna work really well.
you don't have to say no or anything if they sniff or if they stop. It's just another come. That's the only word you want them to hear right now. You don't want their name. You just want the word come. Later on down the road, because what you're going to see in the first session, I guarantee you, everybody's coming back to me and saying they're seeing this recall stick much faster. Because of the beep and the system. Like, if the dog feels the leash get tight, and then here's a beep, and then there's a stim, it's all this information, but it's not cluttered. It's not pop, beep, stim, come. All this. It's just, they feel a little tension here. And then they might look at you. And then they hear the beep. What's that mean again? Stim, pop. Good boy. And you give them the answer. That stim has to happen though, because it's what's going to take place of the prong. It's going to make it off leash. So right now, the prong pop's what's correcting them and bringing them towards you. If you stim and then do your prong pop, I know I'm asking a lot of you, but if you can get good at handling this e-collar on top of what you're already doing, you're going to have an off-leash dog in half the time. And I'm not saying that that's the goal is for being quicker, but it's just a side effect. It is quicker, but the thing is, I find that if you get good at training like this, it's going to stick better in the dog's head. They're not going to need as much from you.
More solid for him.
It's something for you to go play with by yourself when nobody's watching, and just make your mistakes, because it's gonna happen. Accept your mistakes, learn from them, and keep going until you become a master at training the recall. Because after the recall, and we will get to this eventually if you want to, we can then take all that hard-earned work that you put into that recall and really steal some of it and turn it into heel without having to work super hard for an off-leash heel. We can take a lot of the foundation of the recall and turn that into a heel. And another thing about the recall is eventually we do get that recall to a sit. And from that sit, now we have a stay command. So we have a recall to a stay command, recall to a stay command. If you add a walk on that, you got the foundation, you know, because place and down are just stay commands.
Yeah.
So
My goal for them is definitely to have all the basic commands so they feel really comfortable, confident in the house.
absolutely.
And then we can build on taking him for walks and stuff like that.
Yeah, because you're going to kind of follow his progression, I imagine. But
Yeah.
I would imagine, yeah, continue.
I was just gonna say, so we talked about the organic ritual, you know, which is kind of, you know, like you're claiming that food or that item
That's
and
correct.
pairing it with that. Like you said, I need to have this conversation with you early on. I will correct you. That's mine.
Yes.
And so, what benefit would there be? Because I know Martha does claim it, and I've never really gotten I've never had a dog to do it with. I say out to my dogs, and they move away.
That's
And
good too.
I taught them long time ago, and it was just but they're older dogs, and they're not really resourcey or anything like that, and so I can just say out, and they'll move away, you know?
Yeah, but
So, is there a claim it exercise? I know Mark used to do it with the e-collar that would be beneficial for him. I mean, again, I want to get all the foundation
Yeah,
that
yeah.
he understands the e-collars mean.
Yes.
But I think that would be very important for the preventative on the resource guarding.
yeah, I think so. I think so. Obviously, there's a lot of different ways to tackle it, but so here's the thing. I would totally do that myself, where I would claim stuff. So the way you do it is you got to have something that he wants. That's the first thing you got to find. Whether he's hungry or it's a toy or something, you're gonna have to find something to claim. And here's the thing that you got to remember. There's two conversations to have. There's a conversation where you say, okay, let that go. We're done with it for now, but you can have it again next time we play. And then there's the conversation of don't ever fucking touch that again, right?
Like the garbage.
Right, yeah. So you got to know
Yeah,
which one we're going to be doing. And I'm imagining that for the most part, it's going to be, let's just go with don't touch that. That's mine. That's the vibe. Like another dog would. I always do that when I do these claiming exercises. I definitely go into the mentality of how dogs do this to each other. I know how it's important to see them do it to each other so that you can see the vibe that the dog carries. It's pretty impressive, and it's pretty amazing how a dog can gain influence over another dog like this and keep them from touching stuff while they're around. So basically you can literally put things on the floor. You're just bringing up a whole lot of different ways to proof this dog.
Well, so I'll give you an example. On the prong collar, there's this, my female that likes this little mushy monkey that just lives out in my backyard, and she goes and picks it up once in a while and acts like she's killing it. And he saw it, and he picks it because when he was really young, they used to play tug with him a lot. They used to like grr, and that was another thing I told him. I go, that was probably wrong. We didn't need to amp him up with his mouth.
Yeah, definitely.
That gets you bit. Anyway,
Good.
so I noticed he really liked it, and he just naturally starts to want to kill it, and shake it. And so I have the prong on. I'm like, I'm just going to see how he responds to me, because I know he has an issue putting his mouth on people with them. He hasn't done it with me, but with them.
Nice.
And so he has it in his mouth, and I just calmly go over to him, and I give him a little pressure up, and he sits, because we've been working on that. And then I slowly bring my hand in. I don't go for it or grab it. I'm not going to tug it. I'm not playing with him. I just grab part of it, and then I just said, out. And he didn't do anything. Actually, I saw his jaw clench. And so then I put the pressure of the prong up, and I said it again, and then he goes to tighten more, and I give him more pressure, and I say, out again, and then he goes, and he
Nice.
drops it. And so I did that like 3 or 4 times, and by the time, in the third time, he drops it a lot quicker.
Nice.
But again, I'm having to do multiple.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a nagging way to pressure him, but I didn't want to just snap it out of his mouth. That's not the
No, this is the teaching of of what you're asking. So basically, you're teaching him the word out means to drop it. That is not punishing. So what you're feeling when you're like, I'm teaching it to him, but I don't know if it's going to stop it, is because you haven't got to the point where it's going to be practically used. The next step to really get this to work going home without it being a pain in the ass, and to be able to compete with your competitor dog trainers, is to get this shit on e-collar. So now the pressure source that you're using is going to be e-collar, so that they have a way. It's too dangerous to pick up a leash and pop him when he's an adult. It's too fucking dangerous. An adult husky, you're gonna give a large pop. An owner who's unskilled, I don't think so. He's gonna bite them.
That's like, I keep reminding her, you do know this 20-some-pound dog
He's
is
gonna be
70
huge.
pounds.
Yeah, it's gonna be huge. So I would say you're on the right track. That's beautiful. And now that he has some experience with that, the only next step,
Concept, but with the e-collar.
you can do the same exact thing. You can still do this because this is the language he knows. But once this turns on, the e-collar turns on too. Once this turns off, the prong that is, the e-collar turns off. It's the same tool to the dog. It's the same pressure. You start at that working level because this is the first time. And then you'll dial up if you see in his face it's not enough, like you did with the prong. But instead of doing this, you don't necessarily, you want to start getting it on the e-collar. Eventually you want to get it so you don't have to have a leash and you can say out. This is once he knows it, once you're like, okay, it seems like he knows it, and he eventually drops it once I correct him. But I'm pretty sure he knows it. Then you set up a situation where he has something in his mouth. Don't get super confrontational with him. Just look at him and say, out, and then wait a second, and if he doesn't out, then you give him a big boy correction on the e-collar and watch that shit come out of his mouth, and then say, good boy. And now, because that is more practical. And then after the out, it's, once you get the dog trained up, it's out, and then it's recall and put them somewhere, onto a place or something. And then grab the resource. This is the safest way for a dog who actually has issues with it. Exactly. He's just gonna keep going.
Then I went and got and then he was able to eat because he's in the kennel and doing this explosion. And so I went and got my pet convincer, and then I went to open the kennel calmly to take the food away, which I had done before, previous interactions. And he gave me attitude and started snarling, and he didn't lunge for me, but he was just like guarding it. And so then I said no, and I gave him the shusher again. Just exploded because he was already on fire in his brain. So I realized that was my fault, that I just added fuel to the fire.
Unless you're prepared to extinguish it, because it could work in that moment as long as.
And that was my mind, is I need to put him in his place, and I need to get that food.
Yeah.
So I went and put on rubber gloves, and I got a stick, and I pinned him to the floor of the kennel, and I took the food.
Wow. Right.
But he still was like, no, I don't want to be pinned. Leave my food alone. And I pinned him to the ground. I reached in and took the bowl. Because in my mind, it was like, I can't let him keep eating.
Right.
But to limit that interaction and keep that fire from happening, and not to avoid it, but
no, I agree.
Take him out of the kennel first, then go for the resource.
Yes.
Same thing when doing claim it. He lets it go, move him away.
Yes, that's what I do.
Go back and get the resource.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's smart.
And put him on place or something, because then if you're going towards that resource, you see him get off place, just turn around, correct him, put him back on place. No, let me grab it. And it's safer, and it keeps you from having to do all this fancy training where you teach the word out and it makes them run away and go find a place bed and all this stuff, which is fine and dandy, but the thing is, it takes time and effort, and I'm not that kind of guy, so I just say out, come, place, and it works.
Dog training is teaching me a lot of patience that I never really had.
That's where all my patience goes.
That's why God put this in front of me, is because I need to learn calmer patience.
I tell you, dog training is great for a lot of personal development. Patience being one of them.
Yeah.
But you're on the right track with this dog, and he sounds like he could go either way, right? If he had the wrong upbringing, he could turn into a nasty little guy. But it also looks like, genetically speaking, it's definitely a doable thing with you, and I don't think it could be a point. It could get to the point where it doesn't manifest anything big by the time he's an adult. However, this is how we want to send him home. Fully e-collar trained. If they ask a command and he doesn't do it, they correct and he does it. Okay? This is what they're buying from you. If he has something in their mouth at a birthday party or something, oh look, he got that thing, and they need to get it out from him, they're paying you for when they say out and he doesn't, they click a button and he does without complaining. And that you say go to bed and he doesn't, go to the place bed and he doesn't, you click the button and he does. These are the things, this is what you're giving them. Okay? You're not rehabbing him yet or anything. He's how can you rehab him? This is what he is, right? So you are giving them tools for those moments, especially for those moments of hairy situations where the dog doesn't want to listen, looks like it's not going to listen, isn't listening. They got to click a button and it all goes away. So there's a few things we need to do. I think you're going to do a good job at training the commands with the e-collar. I don't think you're going to find it as difficult as you think it is. But one thing you do want to make sure you practice with this e-collar, with this dog, is that corrections mean to calm down. Too. Like, don't get elevated when you get a correction. Right. So if your dog gets elevated with a correction, which can happen early on, you teach them to calm down by, well, I do. This is the way I do. I'm sure there's other ways. I correct them for bitching back at me if I correct them. So if I correct them and they go, rah! Then they get corrected again for that. And then they go, rah! Again, and then they get corrected again until they stop bitching and then they get stopped. And so that's one way. The other way, because they're very vocal.
I've learned with my male, he's a grumbler. He's 11. My female is a high-pitched little bitch. And she used to run the streets with the
Oh,
guys.
no kidding.
We picked her up on the road. She looks a lot like she's mixed, but
They're very
she's a
vocal.
high-pitched, whiny little bitch over every little thing. Like, I'm murdering her.
I know, it's
You
terrible, isn't it? I know. Oh, I know. Izzy, our dog, I don't know if you know Izzy, she's half husky, and you can tell. She's so dramatic. It's theater over
And
here.
I've noticed with him, he does give a good bark, and he hasn't started like talking or anything necessarily, but he's like.
You just want to make sure that his reaction is complete calmness, and it's not going to be like that naturally.
Follow through.
You have to follow through in the way that I usually use a slip lead, and while I'm doing this stuff, I'm using a slip lead and not a prong, because if a dog,
I don't know how to use a slip lead.
oh, that's okay. It's actually,
I mean, I know what it does. I know you slip the lead on and
yeah, you do.
they can't get out of that.
You got to make sure it's really high. That's one of the big mistakes,
So
is
you
having
cinch
it low.
all the way up before
All
you
the way.
even start, as if it were like a flat buckle already on.
You put it all the way up like they do in those show rings when they're walking the dog around with two fingers, and it's way up here. You put it up way up behind the ears, because if you push your own neck with your finger way up under your chin, there's no issues with let's say, I'm not saying there's no issues with breathing, because the point is to stop them from breathing so they stop fighting. But if you feel down here when you poke and feel how uncomfortable that is, and then feel up here how it's not like that, it's less. It's more comfortable for them. It's more effective for them. It's less choking, so that's a plus. We don't want any windpipe issues. You're going to be safe up here, but it's also the most effective spot too. You got more control of the dog because you got the whole head, not the chest. The closer it gets to the neck, the chest is involved, and they got all those muscles.
And so you're saying if when instead of you do that instead of prong collar, because when he's talking back,
You just make him swallow
I'm
it.
not.
He swallows those. So basically, it works like this. You're not popping.
I'm not using a prong collar pop to correct him.
That's
I'm
correct.
using, this means calm down or you're getting shut down.
Basically yes, but in the way it's going to work is you're going to do your correction, and he's going to yelp, and then you're going to say no or whatever you use for disapproval, correct on the e-collar, and then pressure up on the leash. So what happens is he swallows it. So it's like without that, he yelps and then barks at you for correcting him. This is important. We tackle this, and it's a pain in the ass, Holly. It's a big pain in the ass. But if you tackle this, your dog's going to be so much better for it.
Yeah.
So
and I
they,
think that's where he's going to start developing pushy bragging.
that's it's going to be if it's going to be a shit show. Just know that this is going to be the shit show session. But you are prepared for it because you know it's going to be a shit show session. So you're prepared for it, but it's all that pile of shit that you can feel under the hood that you need to get rid of, which is just a little pushy. All that stuff that you feel in your commands where it's just a little pushy, it all comes out in a session like this, and it all goes away in a session like this too. So you pay the price as a trainer by doing this hard session, which a lot of people don't do, and then your dogs will feel better. They will feel better, and some people won't know why they feel better, they just feel better. And so the thing is this is how we use the slip lead. Take your time with it. Look up Cesar Millan and watch him use it. That's all he uses is slip leads. But you notice it's pressure up, just like you were doing with that prong. And the idea is, like, at its full swing, the front two paws get lifted off the ground slightly so that they can't go crazy. As they start to calm down, you release them. They start to go crazy again, we go back up. You start to calm down, you go down. And they learn, basically the first time, if worst case scenario, they don't stop fighting, and then they stop being able to breathe, and that naturally you'll see the body start to relax a little bit, let them down. Not necessarily because, obviously if you keep going, they'll pass out. I haven't had a dog, by the way, I've never had a dog pass out or anything. You can though, apparently. If you keep it up, you can make them pass out. But you have way more time than you think you do. He's really young though, so watch it. Watch it and be careful and be gentle, be effective. If you have this slip lead in the right spot, 2 fingers up can hold that guy where he needs to go. You don't need to yanking him all over the place. He calms down, and then he gets a pat on the head. Good boy.
So just to clarify then, again, this part's really talking about how to correct that little back talk,
Yes.
where he's objecting to my correction.
That's exactly what's
I've
happening.
given him a correction on the e-collar.
Yes.
And he goes, sit. So he's not like totally reacting nasty about it. He's just like, sit. I don't like that.
Right.
I don't like you telling me no.
You can try another correction.
I say to my son, hey, I don't like you talking back to me.
That's pretty much it, yes.
So,
Why we do that, one of the reasons is, first of all, it calms them down. It does teach them to calm down. But if I go up first and take the air away and then hit my heavy number, all that flip out just stops right here. It never makes it out of the mouth. All right? And then I let them down when they calm down. That's a safety thing for me too, but it also, every dog wants to breathe, So I find even dogs who don't listen to the e-collar or bonker or anything, they all listen to this one. I've never seen a dog not listen to that, because you'll see they'll hold in there. You'll see dogs trying to hold in there when you're asking them to go in the kennel, right? And you're doing this with the pressure. If you're using a slip lead, it's different than a prong. They'll go like this, and they'll go like this.
I love the prom so much. And
But you'll see right before they're about to go into panic mode, they can't breathe anymore. You watch their eyes do this, they don't know what to do, and then they take a step forward and they release it. So this is a very powerful tool, so I would recommend becoming really good at it, because it is the number one tool for aggression. It is the number one tool for a lot of solving a lot of behavioral issues.
Just being able to teach him that this correction means calm down, not talk back.
Yes, and there's multiple different scenarios that we do this in, and this is one of them. If he's talking back, this is just one conversation towards the overall good. And the way I would do it is I'd correct him, he'd yelp, and then he'd bark, and I'd say no, and I'd correct again without the slip lead. And then he'd yelp, and then he'd bark, and then I'd say no, and I'd correct, and then put him up like this until he calmed down and put him down. This is going to have to happen when he gets into those modes of bitching back at you. So this one's hard to set up. It usually just happens.
Object like one time, that first time, and
Yeah.
then he doesn't do it again.
Then don't go
or
there.
The conversation, he heard
Yeah,
me.
then don't go there. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
But
I don't want that. I don't want him to take from me.
because then there's something that you need to be aware of, is that he eventually, before he leaves your place, he needs to feel what a heavy correction is and what to do with it. He's gonna need to know. If you can't give an owner a collar,
He's gonna get it if he does that again to me at the dog bowl.
it's the best thing that could happen.
I'm not gonna go back to no bowl for a while, but he's gonna be wearing the e-collar all the time here.
If he gives you an opportunity, because dogs will do this all the time, where they just throw something your way, and now you have to have that conversation, or it's a great time to have that conversation, then absolutely do what we said. Correct them and end it. Because the other work is the double down though. This really seals the deal. Because now what we can do is he knows that if he feels stimming, if he's unsure what to do with it, just relax. And that double down teaches you, it will eventually teach them to take a large correction and immediately calm down. So it's a huge skill for if they're correcting him for just not staying in a downstay or a guest coming in on place, and they correct them high and it gets them amped up, it falls apart. So the double down is wonderful. Once you teach down, you teach the double down. You basically have a dog on the ground or on place, roll a ball by, they pick their head up, they show interest, click, silently without saying anything. They might just put their head down automatically, and then you say good. If they don't, then tell them down. But I'm constantly seeing if they give it to me without me having to tell them, and a lot of times they do. You do it with dogs barking. You have a dog on place, you have a dog bark, they pick their head up intensely like they want to be involved. Correction, they put their head back down, you're in a good spot. Knock on the door, same thing. You want to be able to eventually justify hitting them at something pretty heavy and then putting their head down so you know they can do it. It's part of the training.
Because I hear, you're saying correction, and in my mind I'm thinking like higher than working level. So it might be slightly higher than their working level, but not a total shut this hell up.
No,
So if they keep
that's
doing it,
right.
I want to go really fast.
That is correct. That is exactly how I use it. You're going to take the working level out of the equation once the command's taught. And basically, because after that, there's no more, everything's just punishment for not listening. It's just different degrees of it. So like, the first one might be like, it might almost just be like, kind of like a warning. Like, yeah, I felt it, but it wasn't really that uncomfortable. But then the second one's going to be a mild correction. It's going to be a nice little, hey, knock it off. The third one's going to be like, not good, not good. And then we go right back to the system again where we start low again and work our way up. We don't stay high, right? But I mean, we're covering a lot, but these are all the things we hit in a board and train to make sure that when the dog goes, they know how to receive a correction without getting confrontational and without getting rowdy, without getting stimulated, aroused, just completely calming down. And that's the secret sauce. And you'll know when you got it. You will know when you don't got it because
It takes practice, but I think what's really, I was again just trying to isolate what I need to do different here. One, I need to go right to the tool that's gonna really be the most effective with him and keep me safe and prepare him for when he goes home because he's gonna need to be.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. It's gonna be good for him though, man. It really will, because anybody will be able to work with him because you'll be taking that little system that you create on the e-collar, teaching them how to run it and how to operate it, and basically anybody can get him to do anything. A complete stranger, which is something I recommend before he goes home, is having people with your guidance put him through drills that he doesn't know and that they're not trainers, to see if somebody who doesn't know what they're doing does it, is it still successful, you know? Does the dog know enough to figure it out even when the human's kind of being ditzy, you know? And we want...
So, one last thing on the correction and, shutting it down and getting him to realize that a correction means calm down. So if he does have it, now, again, I'm hoping to mitigate that and nip it in the bud in that every little micro back talk he gives me, he's being told no every time. That's my goal. But let's just say everything's going along great, and again, I do the food, and he goes ape shit again. Well, I get an e-collar.
Yes.
I'm going to be ready to
Yes.
him. So, to deal with that aggression, let's say he's and I'm just going to say reaction aggression, but he's in the kennel, he's got his food. Am I going to just give him a zap, or should I be prepared to have a slip lead through the kennel? Or
This is how I would do it. If you really want to know how I would do it, and how I have done it,
Josh, that's why I called you.
the reason why I say that,
You do it.
the reason I say that is because I give different answers because sometimes I don't. Alright, so this is how I do it. Sometimes I don't. I'm trying to think if it's safe enough to tell someone else to do it. Basically, what I do is I would have the dog learning what the rules are in the kennel before we even have that conversation with food. And the rule in the kennel as they develop is to lay down and be quiet. They can get up to get a drink and to stretch and stuff, but they can't stand up and peer and do nothing. They can't. It's the rule here. They have to be in a down once they know it. So once we get that done, and by the way, all of our dogs here are either 6 months or older, so I don't do this young, right? Even though I have done this young.
Yeah.
These are so you're gonna have to take everything I say and adjust it to him, being how old he is. But these are the concepts and the techniques are the same.
A little bit more grace for the wiggling around.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
He has a fight with his tail.
Right,
But
exactly.
he's just,
Exactly.
going around, but
He's gonna be what he.
we're just getting, he's really good at offering a lot of things, and so sits really good right now.
Good.
Place is really good. Now he's a little eager, so I'm trying to slow him down.
Because he wants to do the reps right now.
Sometimes, and say again?
He wants to do reps right now. He wants to work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because he's also food driven, and I'm still trying to do like interval. I'm trying not to feed him all the time, even though he's
Good.
eager. But he's giving me default downs, and I'm rewarding that.
Good.
And then I'm reminded, like this is my actual work office, and I'll put a place cot in here.
Good.
And then just sit, lay down.
You are already on the right track. Everything you do from this Skype onwards, do the same thing for like a week, because you're doing all right, but add the e-collar in before any of the other corrections. So before you go to the prong, just tap the e-collar and then go to the prong, because he knows what to do with the prong. But if you go e-collar first and then go to the prong, you're gonna see within a few days you're not gonna have to go to the prong. It's gonna be about a week, but you're gonna transfer all your hard work. Yeah, exactly. It's gonna be the cue.
So you were saying, we're going to set all this kennel stuff up, but
Yeah.
so going forward,
Yes.
would it be a good idea to make sure he's always laying down? Like, give him
Yeah,
a
like
down
start that
down?
rule
He's
now.
not solid on down as a command yet, so I feel like
Well,
I
wait
really
for
build
it.
on that, but
Wait for it then, but once you get the down solid, which is going to be like training, and you require him to be in a down in the count. Like none of our dogs who are training are sitting up.